Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Unlimited. Today, we are talking about 7 ways to relax this summer and beyond. And the beyond is because all of these ways totally apply to any time. We are talking about it particularly right now in the summer because we are just about at the end of summer, kids going back to school, and this is often a time, especially if you have kids in school, where it's like, oh, we do summer vacation and summer break, and suddenly we're like, wait, we've been doing summer doing, and all these things that we thought we were going to get done that we didn't get done. Now we're trying to cram it in, or we're going these places and doing all this stuff, and it ends up being summer busy, which is why I thought it really important to talk about relaxing and particularly resting. Now, I am also going to be practicing a lot of these ways on this podcast episode because this podcast episode was supposed to be a repurposing of my 5th episode, The Value of Rest. However, I listened to that episode, and I have to admit, I listened to it rather late because I'm like, oh, this is a great episode. We're just going to repurpose it. I listened to it and I went, yeah, no, that doesn't work. Gosh, I wish I'd listened to it earlier, but I was doing things. I was doing other things. So instead, I am giving you a brand new episode, and I am going to be practicing 7 ways to relax, which aren't like the 7 ways I'm going to be talking about, but they're really important ways. And they are releasing perfectionism, forgiving yourself, divesting from the lazy lie, forgiving yourself, prioritizing rest and setting realistic expectations, even if that means as you move forward, because the expectations that you set previously weren't realistic, forgiving yourself, and making space to be you, to listen to yourself. Now, you may have noticed that 3 of those are about forgiving yourself, and that is because that is a core component as we navigate this society and all of the pressures of doing and pushing and hustling and going. It is so important to be able to forgive ourselves for being human. And while I would love to live in a space where we embrace ourselves for being human, we don't live in that space. We are in a space where we're constantly pushed to be other than human, which is part of what we're going to be talking about. But I invite you to lean into that forgiveness piece because that allows us to lean into the growing and learning and being piece. So, some of what I'll be covering in this episode include why it's hard to relax, the pressures of perfectionism and productivity, learning to value rest and release lazy, stop beating yourself up. Yes, there is that forgiveness piece. And then 7 ways to make space for rest. So, without further ado, let's get started. Hey there, I'm Valerie Friedlander, Certified Life Business Alignment Coach, and this is Unlimited. This podcast bridges the individual and the societal, scientific and spiritual, positive and negative, nerdy and no, there's just a lot of nerdy. Come on board and let's unlock a life that's as badass as you are. First of all, I'd like to address the reason why I'm not repurposing an episode here, and that is because while there is a lot of value in my episode, The Value of Rest, I realized when I was listening to it that it is very focused on the time of winter, and that is not right now. So there was just too much of it that was applicable to another season. The other reason, and this is the bigger reason, and that is that I've done a lot of learning over the past few years. And again, while a lot of what I talk about still aligns, there is a critical piece that I need to address from that last episode, and that is that of productivity. There's often talk about the value of rest in a framing of productivity. And it allows a lot of us who have been conditioned around our value being tied to our productivity to embrace rest as a part of that, to start integrating the idea of rest into our lives to give space for that, because it's a way of reducing the conflict of values. And that's something I am going to talk a little bit more about. And I talk about it in that episode of how we beat ourselves up when we have a conflict of values. And it doesn't matter whether they're internalized values or whether they are true values to us, to our authentic selves. When we have values in conflict, we have guilt, and that is a drain of energy, which actually keeps us from really getting the most out of rest and relaxation. And so to be able to integrate that as an important part of that other value allows us to make room for it. However, the productivity value has some major issues. And so while I think it is helpful to be able to go, oh, this value integrates in this other value, the internalization of the productivity value is a bigger issue. And I actually have come to believe that we need to divest from that value, that it's really important to release the internalization. Not to say that doing things and getting stuff done and creating and making is not an important value, but the way most of us have internalized that value and the way it motivates us has a lot of issues. And so I wanted to separate those two pieces and not make rest about upholding productivity, because that has too much issue. One of the books that I've learned a lot about this from, and that have had a huge impact on me in terms of this unlearning and relearning, is Tricia Hersey's book, Rest is Resistance. That book delves way more into rest in a beautiful way, and I actually really highly recommend listening to it. For me, it's been like listening to a prayer, and it was so inspirational. It was one of the reasons why I just couldn't repurpose this episode. So there we are with that. And here we are with this topic of relaxation. So the first piece that I invite you into is that releasing perfectionism. A lot of times when we try and make plans and we try and figure out what things are going to look like, or, put something like a podcast into the world, there's a certain idea of the way it will look and the impact often that we want it to have. We can't always know exactly what the impact of something will have. But that's usually what's motivating us, the intention that we want that impact to have, that there's an idea. This is what I want it to create. And that applies to just about any plans. So if we're talking about summer vacations, if we're talking about doing work around the house or getting stuff done, there's an idea of what we want that impact to be. Sometimes we find out that that impact isn't what we expected it to be. We aren't able to do as much as we thought we would. It was taking more time, more energy, more resources than we realized. We just didn't have enough information to know what to expect realistically. Or we think that it's going to have this particular impact, and then when we do the thing, we find out that it didn't. This applies in so many different areas, but that idea of, we could screw it up. It might not work. I want to get it just right so that I don't have to fix it. I don't have to waste time. Again, tying into that productivity idea. All of those things start to play when it comes to that perfectionism. And it is a way of keeping us stuck and keeping us in inaction. So being able to embrace things as, okay, this is going to be an experiment. I'm going to try this. This is what my intention is, and we're going to do everything we can with the information we have to align what we're doing to what we want to create in the world, what we want to experience, what we want the impact to have, the way we want to show up. We try and align all of those things, which I talk about in my episode about visioning, which I will link in the show notes. Trying to align those, and then knowing that this is an experiment and we're going to get more information. This is that growth mindset. And then when it doesn't look the way we wanted it to, which definitely does happen, we can embrace that. We can forgive ourselves for not knowing better, and we can show up to the new information. And I think that is a critical component of being able to grow, is to be able to forgive ourselves for not knowing better. And that allows us room to learn to do better. So going back to that summer vacation, okay, you made the plans the best that you could with the information and the knowledge that you had at the time. And then if it doesn't look the way you were hoping it would, then you can reflect on that and go, okay, well, what worked, what didn't? What do I want to do differently next time? What did I learn from this? What did I enjoy? What didn't work out? And then you can evolve for next summer or next vacation or next planning or whatever it is. And it also gives us that opportunity to look at those pieces that maybe we don't like to look at, those pieces of programming, of internalization that's like, oh, that influenced this decision. Oh, that was something I didn't realize was part of what was going on for me, and be able to grow from that too. So looking at that shadow side, looking at those things that aren't as fun, it's important to take that space to reflect. But being able to forgive ourselves is a key part. And it's why I listed it 3 times. It's a key part to being able to allow an experiment to happen. Allow yourself to learn from it. When you think that, oh, it's all awful and I'm awful if I don't do it just right, then naturally you freeze up. Naturally you get into fight mode and you want it to be just right. And you don't want to hear it if people weren't happy, and you don't want to think about it because it feels so bad about who you are. It's not who you are. It's where you are. It's what you're learning. So forgiving yourself. The other piece when it comes to relaxation is divesting from the laziness lie. Now, this is a big part of what I want to talk about. And I did talk about it in The Value of Rest, but I didn't have quite the level of information that I have now. Again, that piece of learning. So one of the things that I talked about in that episode has to do with this idea of lazy and the word lazy and how much that comes up in my coaching. So many women, whether they are neurotypical or neurodivergent, and I also work with a lot of people who have chronic illness, and so they're struggling with this concept of lazy. And so much of the work we're doing is unpacking that and shifting that and reclaiming their space and what works for them. But this idea of lazy, I ask in the episode, where is this from? You know, we have such a challenge around sitting, of being quiet and listening, around giving ourselves space. There's such a push to be doing, and I wonder what moved us into this culture of busy and doing. And I wonder if it's a form of control. And that idea of like, well, if you're not actually listening to your intuition, then you're much more controllable by other people or systems, and you're not going to give yourself space to do that check-in, which I was just talking about, of like, is this really fitting? What am I learning? Does this resonate? How do I want to show up? Asking those questions, those things that require space, that require rest for our brains to do their beautiful, creative, imaginative, intuitive thing. Well, that was the piece that I was missing. And unfortunately, this is the piece that I was playing into as well. I also talk about, the reason I say rest and why it's important to productivity is because it allows you to be more aligned with the actions that you're taking. You can resonate more with the steps that you're taking to move yourself forward and create more of a flow versus the hustle. And while that's important, one of the things that Tricia Hersey says is, besides making us all exhausted, grind culture has also stolen your imagination. Our thinking is very limited because we are deeply disconnected, exhausted, sleep-deprived, and don't believe we are worthy of anything unless we burn ourselves out to accomplish it. This all resonates. And the other piece of that is her reminder, We are not resting to recharge so we can do more. We are simply just resting. We are resting because it is our divine and human right. It is not connected to more output. And that's the piece that I was missing. That's the piece that I was trying to get to fit into how we make ourselves okay with rest. And I don't think it's appropriate anymore. I think we need to be able to release the push to do things. And the reason is because of this laziness lie. I don't want to cover over the laziness lie with how rest is actually productive. I want to acknowledge the laziness lie because, at least for me, it's motivational to know where something is coming from and the harmful roots that something has in order to release it and to go, you know what? I'm not doing that anymore. I'm divesting from that in my life so that I can divest from perpetuating it in the world. I follow a person on Instagram who goes by the Femme Historian, and she did a post talking about the book Laziness Does Not Exist by Devon Price, PhD. Dr. Price coined the term laziness lie, which very much resonates with a lot of the things that I talk about when it comes to this mythology around laziness. It means, in this context, a set of unconscious, deeply held cultural concepts that everyone learns throughout life about the importance of effort and the hazards of quote-unquote laziness. It teaches us that our worth as humans is decided by our labor. This mentality drives many of us to overwork ourselves. It ensures that working-class people place their worth in how much labor they are able to do and the strain they can endure, even to their own detriment. Those who are unable to keep up, regardless of working conditions and expectations, are criticized as lazy. Poverty is thus positioned as a moral failing and convinces us that we don't need to be concerned about those suffering from societal issues such as lack of housing, unemployment, poverty, etc. It blames society's most marginalized people for being too, quote-unquote, lazy to solve their own oppression. Of course, there is so much more here, including roots in slavery and the worth of enslaved people and ties between capitalism and the Protestant work ethic that we're not going to get into in this, but I am going to have a link to this book as well as to the Instagram of the Femme Historian. Now, you can see the importance of divesting from this laziness lie, both as it impacts us as individuals, but also how it plays into the broader societal context. Divestment doesn't necessarily mean that we are able to step outside of this context. It's still playing in all of our systems, so being able to hold space to recognize that we're still navigating these systems. But to change the systems, we have to address how it is playing out in our own lives, too. To be able to make room for rest, for our rest and for others' rest, requires divesting from this lie within our own lives. It requires making space for us to listen deeply, to rest and allow space for that deep being and allowing ourselves to hear that humanity, our humanity as well as others' humanity. Rest includes having that patience to really listen deeply, listen to a truth that is greater than the story that we've consumed. Only by allowing ourselves space to be and allowing ourselves to hear ourselves can we then hear others. We can tap into our intuition. We can have that self-awareness. And that allows us to do things differently, to create change, to engage choices. So many people come to me looking for that access to their intuition, to trust themselves again, to be able to do the things that they want to do. So many of the blocks to any of those things have to do with that internalization of the doing equals the value. And so while, yes, you can create more and do more in alignment with who you are when you are giving yourself space to rest, we do that because we're human, not because we need to prove our value. And I think while I hinted at that before, it wasn't as engaged as I think it is important for it to be. And again, forgiving yourself for being part of the laziness lie. For any way that that lie has shown up in your life, forgiving yourself for that, whether it's something that you've done to other people or just done to yourself or both, forgiving yourself for it then allows you to release it so it doesn't block you from showing up to rest and allowing yourself space. Now, prioritizing rest, allowing room to figure out what that looks like. Again, also in that forgiving yourself, like you don't necessarily know what will feel restful. I had a client recently who thought a particular vacation would be restful, and then it was something new that they were doing and it didn't look the way they expected and it ended up not being at all restful. And so part of that work of, okay, how do I engage rest now is releasing the guilt around it not looking the way she expected it to, not knowing better, making the best decision she could with the information that she had. And being able to do that then allows room to rest differently than maybe had been planned. Okay, now we need to prioritize rest in a different way. Now we need to make room coming up where I thought we would have that space here. It didn't end up looking like that, but I still value that space. I still value allowing me to have that. So I am going to create it. It's not, I just lost it. Oh, well, it didn't work out, so now I don't get to have it. It's, no, I get to have it. It didn't happen where I thought it would. So now it needs to happen in another place. So being able to forgive yourself then opens up that door to being able to go, okay, now what? Now where is it going since it didn't go here? And making space to be you, to listen to yourself. This is part of rest. That listening deeply. What do I need? In the book, The Myth of Normal, Gabor Mate talks about depression and this idea of when we depress something and when we depress ourselves. Like this is where depression comes from. It's depressing ourselves. And in that episode that I did on rest, I talk about a quote from Jim Carrey where he said, sadness is just from happenstance. Depression is your body saying, I don't want to be this character anymore. I don't want to hold up this avatar that I've created in the world. It's too much for me. So I think both of those things of like the way I think I have to show up, this contrived idea of how I'm valuable and who I have to be valuable is exhausting. And it's exhausting because it's pushing ourselves down. It's not allowing us to be ourselves. It's depressing us. So knowing that, we need to release that depression. We need to allow that space, allow that room to be you, to not play a character, but to be yourself. Sometimes we don't know who that is. And that is another reason why that rest is so important, is to be able to tap into ourselves again, to hear ourselves again, to be human again. It's uncomfortable to do something different. And I think it's important to honor that and acknowledge that and know that rest isn't going to feel comfortable, which is going to feel weird because of all the things. Rest seems like it should be comfortable, right? Like, of course it's comfortable. What am I doing wrong? It's not comfortable. It's hard. Rest shouldn't be hard. And then we start beating ourselves up again. So forgive yourself if rest is hard. When you're doing something you're not used to doing, especially if there are a lot of internalized stories around it, it is hard to do. Allowing yourself to relax, allowing yourself to rest is not easy when you live in a society like this that is constantly pushing you to not rest, to prove your value, to prove your worth, not to be lazy. So we need to reconnect to the value, not just of rest, but to ourselves. Beyond what we've done, what we've produced, who we've been, but who we are. So I want you to remember that it is okay if it is hard. It takes practice. Learning something new, including rest, takes practice. And while we need that space for dreams and dreaming, for deep rest, deep sleep, connecting to ourselves and to our creativity, that may not be our natural state anymore because of all this conditioning. So it's going to take practice. So be gentle with yourself. Beating yourself up is counter to the process of rest. So again, tapping into that growth mindset, as it were, and going, this is a practice, this is a process, this is an experiment. I'm learning, and it's uncomfortable because it's new and I'm learning. It's impossible to not internalize that laziness lie. So it makes sense that rest would be hard. Give yourself space to practice it. And if you do notice yourself struggling and you start beating yourself up, don't beat yourself up for beating yourself up. That's the other piece, because so often we have all this knowledge and, we've listened to these podcasts and we've read these books and we're like, okay, I should know better. And I'm beating myself up because I'm still beating myself up. Yeah, that's not helpful either. So give yourself grace for that too. When that happens, forgive yourself for that as well. And remember, it's okay to be human. So here are ways that you can practice bringing relaxation into your life and making room for rest. They are 7 ways because I'm using the 7 energy influencers to break things down. That being the mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, environmental, and social spaces. But you'll notice how they all kind of cross over as well. So, mentally, our brains tend to focus on what's wrong. We're wired for survival, so we tend to be on alert for danger or potential danger. That's natural, especially when we're stressed, especially when we're uncomfortable. Our brain's like, oh, why are we uncomfortable? What's wrong here? So, do something that allows your brain to turn off. Give yourself some grace. Remind yourself about the laziness lie and remind yourself that it's okay that it's difficult. Color. Give yourself a break if you need to scroll cute cat videos or whatever. Set a timer if you're worried about just scrolling and having that not actually be relaxing. Take a walk. Have a dance party. Get into your body. Remind yourself about the repercussions of burnout and the supportiveness of rest. As the femme historian reminds in the post that I referenced before, whenever you feel lazy, remember that laziness is an anti-Black, racist, ableist construct of the white supremacy myth and capitalism. Laziness is essentially a tool of oppression. I know, again, that can be motivational for me to be like, well, screw that, I'm going to rest. On an emotional level, notice how you're feeling. Be gentle with yourself. Notice why you have feelings present. They're information about how you're experiencing something. Notice the stories that they're telling and if they're based in the present. One of the suggestions when it comes to meditation is to just notice the thoughts that move through. And rather than trying to control them or force them away, just notice them. Notice that they're there, and you can do this with emotions too. Notice that they're there. Explore what would allow you to honor the reason the emotions are present and care for yourself as you process them. You might also find it helpful to seek gratitude. I'll do like the ABCs of gratitude. What is something I'm grateful for that starts with A? And that can be a mental exercise too. But gratitude taps into your brain, and not like the feeling of gratitude, but just the seeking of gratitude taps into the like happy places in your brain. And it gives your brain another focal point. Now, this isn't to say gratitude is always the solution. Sometimes we use that to bypass something that really needs to be addressed. So this is not for that. But this is for if your brain is gnawing on something, to be able to honor that and what you need to do, but also that you need to be able to give yourself space. Spiritual meditation, deeply listening to yourself, deeply listening to others, being fully present is an extremely spiritual practice. Physical, take a nap. get a massage, stretch, take a bath, feel your feet on the earth, even simply noticing your body, noticing where there's tension, noticing your breath, noticing how your body feels, where your body is. That noticing, again, being fully present. You'll notice how all of these kind of are integrated. They all relate to each other. Environmental can be creating a quiet, restful space. What do you need in that space to help you center, to help you be present? To tap into that, like if you're on vacation, like is there a place that you can go wherever you are to just kind of center for a few minutes? It doesn't have to be a long period of time. This is another place where you go, oh, okay, I'm going to practice. Oh, I got really caught up in the hustle of life and all the doings, and I didn't give myself rest space. Shoot. Now I'm going to give myself some rest space. And maybe it wasn't the 30 minutes, hour, whatever that I had planned, but even 5 minutes, even honoring that you need that's important for you to be human matters. And social. Be with other people who also value rest. People who will encourage and support your rest. People who will even rest with you. I would love to hear if there's something that you do to help create the space for you to rest, or if you're going to pick up any of these other suggestions that I've made. What speaks to you? Send me a message. I'd love to hear your thoughts, what this episode brought up for you, what ideas that came up for you, or anything that you're already using. Send me a message on Instagram, shoot me an email. I always love to hear from you. Again, I highly recommend listening to Tricia Hersey's book, Rest is Resistance. If rest is something you want to incorporate more of in your life, she has so many other. If you are looking for support to shift patterns in your life that are blocking you from being able to show up the way that you want to and engage the impact that you want to have and experience life the way you want to experience it, that's what I'm here for. So please reach out. I have spots on my calendar available for free exploration sessions, so check those out. I wish you beautiful rest as you embrace the rest of this summer time, and I will talk to you all next time. Thanks for listening. I so appreciate you being here. If you got something out of today's episode, please share it. Leave me a review, take a screenshot, and post it on social with a shout out to me. Send it to a friend or, all of the above. Want to hang out more? Join me on Instagram. Or better yet, get on my mailing list to make sure you don't miss out on anything. And remember, your possibilities are as unlimited as you are. Allow yourself to shine, my friend. The world needs your light. See you next time.